Okay, check out this new background. We got the light on the wall. I do want to get a blue one though. We got the Crow Gunk. We have the Status Audio CB1 box. Got my very small collection of Switch games. We have this nice scented candle that just gives a nice bit of background ambience. My microphone, old camera, pot plant, and some nice color contrast, which is a useful photography technique. Photography being the subject of today's video. How's it going, guys? Will here, and on this channel, I've done my fair amount of videos on phone photography. I've done challenges, editing tutorials, tips and tricks, but one really important aspect I realized I've never covered on this channel is camera settings. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be going over the best settings for the highest quality photos, as well as just some nice tips and tricks to take your photos to that next level. And using these settings and tips, I've captured some photos like these. Okay, so first of all, we have settings. So immediately, one of the most important settings that you need to check is this one. If yours currently looks like this, the first thing you want to do is tap it. Okay, I know that seems kind of obvious, but if you want to be taking the highest quality photos on your phone, you don't want to be using the front-facing camera. This has a bigger sensor, more megapixels, and in general will give you a better experience. So while for selfies, something like this may be convenient, it's certainly not going to give you the best possible results. So we're only going to be using the rear camera. The next, and probably one of the most important settings we're going to take a look at, is the file format. To do this, we're going to click on the settings, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate to the camera. After this, we want to go to formats, and there will be two options: high efficiency and most compatible. For our use case, we want to click most compatible. Why is that? Why aren't we using the more efficient compression method? If you want to just take photos and store them on your phone, then Apple's high efficient codec will work just fine. However, we want the best quality photos as well as some options for editing, so therefore we're going to select most compatible, which is actually JPEG. Now, don't get me wrong, JPEG editing certainly doesn't give you the same controls as something like RAW editing, but I mean, as it stands out the box, this thing doesn't have RAW capabilities, so as it stands out the box, JPEG is probably going to be the best option. The next option we're going to be turning on in these camera settings is the grids. On pretty much every single camera I use, I always turn on the grids. On this camera that I'm using right now, I currently do have the grids on, and when framing up photos, which we're going to be talking about later, this thing is so useful. The final settings we need to pay attention to here are the HDR settings. So here there are two options: there's auto HDR and keep normal photo. I honestly recommend checking both. If you're in a high enough dynamic range environment where you would need the feature, it'll do it automatically so you won't forget, but it will also, if you check the lower box, keep the original photo just in case the camera doesn't do a great job. Okay, so that's all for the settings tab. Now we're going to head into the actual camera itself for some more settings. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this icon there. Now, if you've been using iPhone for a while, then you may have come across this feature already. Basically, it's a feature that records a little bit of video when you press the shutter button. And I mean, that can be cool, but the quality loss is significant. And as I said before, with these settings, we're going for the best quality. So we're going to be turning this feature off. The next setting I suggest you get the hang of is the burst mode. Let's face it, humans aren't perfect. We often do shake the camera at the decisive moment. And so getting multiple takes of the same photo is very helpful if you want to reduce your throwaway rate. I honestly can't tell you the amount of times I've just snapped one photo and it's just been like slightly blurred. And that's the worst because it's so close to being usable. I mean, you might be able to remedy it with like a glitch effect, but I'd be willing to say 99% of the time that photo is getting binned. If you want to take the best possible photos, seriously, get used to that burst mode. It will save so many photos. The next in-camera setting we're going to be looking at is the filters icon. Turn it off. If you like the effect, you can always add one of those filters or do some grading in post, but you can't take it away once you've snapped that photo. You can try to neutralize it, but then you'd lose a ton of quality. Seriously, it's just better to do it all in post in a program like Lightroom. Following on from this, we have the portrait mode settings. So in general, I don't really use the portrait mode. I'm not really a big fan of that fake blur background. If I want a blur background, I'm going to be using this camera with a nice fast lens. If I am using the portrait mode though, I will only be using the natural light mode. Again, while it can give some cool effects, we can do most of this in programs like Lightroom and Photoshop, and while these ones can be adjusted in post, it's just better to do it in a program that's going to render those colors nicer so you get a cleaner end result. So in general, as a rule, just never use stage light. After this, we have another tip which is so useful. It took me forever to figure it out, and that is single point autofocus / exposure. This feature is called the AEAF lock. There's a button on my camera for it, but to do it on your phone, simply tap where you want the exposure to be. Once you've got it right, hold it, and as we can see, we have activated AEAF lock mode. To disable it, simply tap on the screen in a different point and you'll be able to disable it and set a different exposure point. This is super useful if you want to adjust your composition and you have a custom exposure. Speaking of custom exposure, I always recommend exposing for the highlights. As we talked about with the JPEG earlier, it's not raw. There isn't all that much dynamic range in the highlights. It also, if we're being honest, hasn't got the strongest roll off. So what I recommend doing is exposing for the highlights, dragging those shadows up if you need to. And then again, if you need to, you can add a noise reduction filter. Now, most of the time this isn't necessary, but sometimes if you have to drag those shadows up a fair way, this image may need a little bit of help to stay noise free. My final tip for today is to get creative with the framing. Now that we have the grids enabled, we can see where each item in the frame is gonna be. So we can follow some framing techniques like the rule of thirds, using leading lines, and simply following some basic framing techniques can take your photos from looking pretty amateur to really good very quickly. Alright guys, so thank you for watching. Remember to like the video. If you want to see more content like this, then smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I will see you guys in the next one. My dog is barking. I think that means the post's here.